Hi, and welcome to the Take the Stage podcast. I'm your host, Alexis Alvarez, and I'm on a mission to help make diversity more of a reality for lower middle market and middle market investment firms. Take the Stage celebrates and amplifies diverse voices and serves as a platform for conversations that encompass a wide range of perspectives. You're going to hear candid conversations that touch on career paths, the not so linear kind, valuable insights, practical advice, and honest stories on navigating and succeeding on the buy side. Today on Take the Stage, we sit down with Samara Mejia Hernandez, founder and managing partner at Chingona Ventures, a Chicago-based early-stage venture fund backing bold founders who are reimagining how we learn, work, and live. The firm makes its mark by writing the first and often largest check into a company's first institutional round. In this episode, we discuss Samara's unapologetic rise in venture capital and the power of leading with conviction, culture, and clarity. We talk about how she broke into VC by taking calculated risks and refusing to wait for permission, the story behind naming her firm Chingona Ventures and how it unlocked a brand with bite, what it took to raise capital while pregnant and how she set boundaries without backing down, how she's redefining pattern recognition and finding alpha where others aren't looking, and more. I'm very excited today to have Samara Mejia Hernandez. She is the founder of Chingona Ventures. Now, before we actually get started, Samara, I have to say that I am also Mexican-American, and we are about the same age. And so I just have to ask this question. How mortified was your mother when she found out that you were naming your firm Chingona Ventures?
Not only was she not mortified, she was very excited, and she wears all of our swag. So,
Really?
yeah. So, the name Chingona means badass woman, and it comes from Mexico, where I was born, and where my family's from. When I first started to think of the name, I didn't have a name, and my younger sister was the one that said, "You should name your fund Chingona Ventures. That's who you are. That's who you're trying to invest in, and not just women, but just incredible founders building businesses. And doing a startup is very difficult. Investing in startups is challenging, and that there's a big failure rate. But there could be these huge wins as well. And so when I launched it, my sister gave me the idea, and I thought it was very fitting that we call each other that to pump ourselves up. And my mom was very excited for what I was doing. So she thought the name was fitting, and she's very excited for the name. And like I mentioned, she wears all the swag. So she is very supportive.
The reason why I asked that question is because, I know what Chingona means, and it's badass woman, but there's also like an edge to it, right? Like it's maybe like a word that I wouldn't necessarily use in front of my grandma, because it's like one of those words where it can be, I think now, especially, it's a little bit more, it's part of the lexicon, right? And it's a little bit more, except that's how I felt. That's why I was like, because I was actually, I have to tell you, I was talking to my parents when I got you scheduled. And I was like, I'm talking to this, I'm talking to a founder of this firm, and it's called Chingona Ventures. And it was funny. The reactions from my two parents were my dad was like, "Oh, that's really cool." And my dad is about 7 years younger than my mom. My mom is, from the 40s. So maybe a generational thing. And my mom's face was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, my mom's a little bit on the younger side. My mom was born in 1961, so she's
So she's very young.
She's younger, and also though you get that reaction, right? That's kind of the point. I'm not a branding person. That's not my background at all. But you get this reaction, and so you remember us. We get a lot of inbounds because of our name.
Yeah.
And so I don't know about brand building or anything like that, but because of the name, we get a ton of inbound from a lot of different people, you certainly don't forget it. And so it's gotten it's great. It gives a good laugh if you know what the name means.
Yeah.
It gives a strong reaction. And I fundamentally believe, when you're starting something, when you're building a firm or an organization, you have to stand for something or you stand for nothing. And, it is a little bit bold, which is what we're
Bold is a
trying
good
to
word.
do.
Yeah.
And it's something that's memorable. So.
Yes, no, definitely. I think I would counter what you just said. You clearly do know something about brand marketing because I think I came across Chingona Ventures like maybe 3 years ago. So before the power, before the power list. And I remember thinking, oh, who is this? And let me take a look. And I don't think I had reached out at that point, but I had, I had heard of you. So when I had seen you, for those that are maybe listening or unfamiliar, the Power 100 list, for those folks that are contributing to diverse representation in the alternative investment space. When I saw it, I was just like, oh, it's I clearly need to get on your radar.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
Yeah, no. So I wanted to kind of maybe take this in a little bit of a different direction, and really touch on things. Now, again, you're, aside from having this very memorable name, you're also, you're not the first Latina that I've had on, but you're the first Latina founder, which I really love because I'm a Latina founder as well. I have my own, recruitment business, a little bit different, but there's very few of us, right? There's really, truly not that many Latina founders. It's growing, but I in the alternative investment space, and when you were stepping into this for a space that is notorious for not making room for women, much alone Latino women, what made you believe that there was space for your voice, your lens, your fund, everything that you're now doing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I didn't know there was room, and I don't know if I ever thought about it. So I think a lot of what happened in my early career was not by design, but almost by accident. And I mean, I worked really hard. My background is engineering. I'm an industrial engineer by training. And I did my first internships and my first jobs on Wall Street. And it was because I was at a recruiting conference and a recruiter said I should, as an engineer, I should be on Wall Street. And throughout my career, I've had great mentors and great sponsors, great people that saw something in me that maybe I didn't see myself right away. And they've kind of pulled me into an industry or into a company or into a role. And I'm extremely grateful for that. I think the second part of my career was definitely more intentional. But I just knew early on, I love math. I love science. And that's what led me to study engineering. I was looking for a job, and I was at the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers at a conference. And so the first firm I worked at was there, and they brought me on, and I figured out I love finance. I love Wall Street. I never really, I knew what the stock market was because I took some business classes in high school, but I didn't know this whole world of investing and this whole world of building wealth because I grew up in a very low income environment where you kind of save and that's it, and you earn minimum wage. So it was fascinating to me to say, oh my goodness, this is how people are making money. You make money work for you. There's a stock market. There's all these different vehicles to invest in and grow your money. And so that was fascinating to me. And then when I went to business school, I wanted to stay in finance, and I did an internship and with an early stage firm here in Chicago, and I just fell in love with it. I'm like, what is this? You barely have any numbers. You may not have a product. You may not have a name for a company, and you have to decide whether or not to invest. And I was fascinated by it. I was fascinated by the type of investing. I was fascinated by the founders that were building these companies, fascinated by the products, the solutions that were being built for some of the toughest problems and at the earliest stages. And I loved it. I loved everything about it. So it was really driven by my interest Now, if you would have told me how hard it was to get, or what percentage I was of one of the Latinas graduating with an engineering degree, or one of the Latinas on Wall Street, one of the few getting an MBA program, one of the, if any at the time, going into venture capital, those numbers, even now, haven't grown as much and seem scary, right? Or the probabilities. I didn't think about that per se. I just pursued my passion and interest and curiosity. I've always been super curious. And the way I think about it too is from a risk perspective. I didn't know how risky it was to do this. I just followed my interest and heart and passion. But now when I think about now being more intentional about what I do going forward, what I advise people is just on the risk piece. When you think something is really risky, taking a look at it differently and taking a step back, and I always think about a calculated risk. So for instance, when I graduated from business school, I didn't have a job right away. And so I said, okay, I have enough money for 6 months until it runs out. And so in those 6 months, I'm going to explore what I want to do. I'm going to try doing different projects, intern with some companies, startups, VCs, to try to get into this role. And so it was risky to graduate without a job, especially when you have all these loans and you don't have a cushion. Your parents can't take care of you. But I gave myself a time frame, and I said, okay, in these months, if I don't have that, then we'll go back and get a job. And I did. I didn't get the VC role in 6 months, but I did get it afterwards. And the way I've thought about it, the way I've got into this was, one, because I had great mentors and people that saw something in me early on. 2, I worked my butt off, but I also explored a lot of the interests that I had and curiosity. And I didn't realize how hard it was, I guess. There was maybe the naiveness that helped me. And then 3 is really thinking about when you do want to explore something you really love. And it may sound risky, or it may be risky, thinking about it from a calculated risk perspective, and what are things that you can do to make it less risky. Give yourself a time frame, save up a certain amount of money, thinking about it as in not forever, but what if this works? How well could it be? What if it doesn't work? How can I still pursue it, and knowing that I'll be okay at the end?
Mm-hmm. I want to touch on one of the points that you mentioned, because you said that, I like how you framed it, because this is, when I work with my candidates, I coach them through a lot of things. And part of it is, I have a framework that I use, and I basically say, everything in life requires purpose, patience, and intention. And the patience piece of it is really understanding like the timeline, right? And giving yourself time, and to achieve, to kind of give yourself these milestones during this time frame that you give yourself. So I like that you mentioned that, like, okay, I have 6 months to do this. But you mentioned, okay, in those 6 months that you're working to try to get into VC, you didn't get it. You didn't get that job. And so that's but you kind of brushed over it very quickly. You're like, well, I eventually got into it. But that's the part, that's the hard part, right? Because so if you take me back to that time when you didn't get into VC and you really, were really set on it, how did you get back on that horse, and how did you continue to eventually make that pathway into what you're doing?
Well, look, at the time when I graduated, especially in Chicago, jobs were not posted. There weren't many jobs. Now there's more jobs posted online, but this is a warm intro industry for both founders and for LPs, investors, as well as for getting jobs. But yes, none of the jobs were posted, and I think I was the only one in my class recruiting for venture capital. Like, it wasn't even the thing it is today. Now I get high school students applying for roles. It's crazy. But so I gave myself the 6 months, and in that time frame, I had done projects for VC firms. I had done some consulting work for startups, but there was just not an opening that I knew of. And I knew I needed to go start paying my rent and start paying my loans. And so I did end up going into a role that I knew I could do, and that I knew it allowed me flexibility to still continue to pursue my interest in venture capital. So any waking moment that I didn't have at work, which was very flexible because I could do that job. It wasn't as challenging for me. It was something that I had done already or could easily do. I worked on getting physically fit, being in business school and years of being on Wall Street in an intense job took a toll on mental and physical health. And so I focused on working out. I focused on getting back in shape, focused on building relationships again. And so when your mind and body are in a good position, I think it also puts you in a good position to find these new opportunities. And I continue to network and I continue to try to find opportunities. And it took about another 6 months, I would say. But then through my networking, I found somebody that knew a fund that was starting up in Chicago. And so I got introduced. And when I got introduced, I was in the candidate pool. I was, I think, one of the few with my profile. And this is another thing, if you're helping people recruit for new jobs, there's two things I think that helped. So one, I was in sales at Goldman Sachs. And so in the early part of my career. So I'm used to people turning me down constantly. And I'm used to networking and I'm used to trying to, yeah. And also growing up with immigrant parents, it builds your pre-haze, I say. But you get this sort of different kind of mentality. And so I was in the end of the final rounds and I was with 3 other candidates, and the partner called me and said, look, we're at the end. We're just finalizing kind of our thoughts and we'll get back to you soon. And then I don't know what inspired me to do this. I just said, hey, who am I competing against? What's their profile? And so he named the profile. So one of them had startup experience, one of them had VC experience, had more education and more degrees at least. And I said, okay, well, do any of them have sales experience? And he said, no. I said, okay, well, I don't have that other experience, but I can learn. And what the fund's focus was on investing in companies that have an unfair advantage of customer acquisition. So it's all about sales. I'm like, look, I've done sales in the worst climate during the financial crisis. I can do sales. You can't really teach sales. You actually have to do it. I mean, you could teach it and train it, but you actually have to experience it and sell it and come up and constantly, we were ranked every single day and figure out different ways of getting to a yes and building relationships and pitching products differently. I said, I've done that. The other candidates haven't. I'll learn everything else. And so somehow, I don't know if that, whatever I said, I think helped convince him to give me the role. And then I would say the second thing from a recruiting perspective is when I had applied for the role, there wasn't a formal job description, but I remember when I was applying for VC roles, the job descriptions all had a list of 10 things. And I remember looking at them like, oh, I don't have 8 of them. So initially a reaction was not to apply. And I would say that for a lot of women more than men. And I remember my boyfriend, now husband at the time, was like, well, you have 2 of them, you can learn the rest. I'm like, is that how guys think? Is that how, right? Or not just guys, but like people, just general people. And so I would say also, as you're exploring new jobs and new careers, I think for me, yes, was I maybe on paper, less qualified in terms of specific things that the firm may have put? Maybe. Probably. But, there's things that you also bring to the table that you can kind of win, or you can pitch yourself, or that they may not have thought to put on a resume or on a job description. And so for me, I think that was the other piece where it was applying for roles where, okay, you have some of the basics, understanding what you can learn and understand, more importantly, what value you can bring in day one. So I think that helped. And then also kind of tying it back into the job, my partner called me and said, all right, here's the job. Here's the title. Here's the salary. Here's the carry. There's no room for negotiation. And, let us know. And so I went back, and again, I think it was my boyfriend / husband now at the time, and he goes, everything's negotiable. I was like, what? And so I was so excited about the role, but I said, look, I called the partner. I said, I know you said it's non-negotiable, but here's what I want to negotiate. It's the title, the salary, and my experience. One of the 3. And I remember him being on the phone. He's like, okay. He seemed kind of annoyed, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose the job. What did I do? He calls me back and he goes, well, the fact that we told you it's not negotiable and you still negotiated, like, that's the kind of person we want. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was sweating. And then I was like, okay, thank goodness I got the job. But I'm saying all those things because you're right. I did kind of skim through that. But I think that's really important because, growing up, certainly in my household, we weren't taught to negotiate or speak up or anything like that. It's kind of like you get what you get and that's it. So it wasn't natural for me. And in this industry, I negotiate every single day. I negotiate on deals. I negotiate on term sheets. I negotiate all the time. As a matter of fact, as a mom, I even negotiate with my 5-year-old, my 6-year-old every single day. So there's always negotiating. And so I think finding a job is one piece, and the points that you mentioned, but then there's also this other piece around thinking about it from a different lens, not just what you get in terms of job description or salary or title. It's saying, all right, what is here? What do I have? What can I learn? And what can I bring to the table day one? And then you get the offer and it's like, okay, well, what can I negotiate? Anything, right? Salary, title. Salary might be hard if there's a set budget, but you should always negotiate salary. But you can negotiate title, experiences. There's other things you can negotiate around that. So anyway, that was the story around me getting my first role in venture.
I love it. And I get it. Like, you're telling me this story and I was like, yeah, the Chingona part. Like, I get it.
Coming out.
It's coming out. I see it. It's totally like, yeah, it's your persona. That you gave really great advice. And I really like that, again, going back to the word that you chose, bold, right? Because especially when you're young, it's very hard to be bold because you have these insecurities like, I'm going to lose this job, or I can't ask for that. They already said it's non-negotiable. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because my husband said the same. He tells me this all the time, and I'm still, like, I'm in my 40s, and that's that's a side comment. Like, I've from speaking with so many women, from analyst to partner, and across all these different markets and countries, what I've learned is that the feelings and the insecurities and the issues that women feel, even if I perceive them to be the biggest ballers out there, like partner level, they still deal with this kind of stuff. Totally. So I think that's like, we need to talk more about that, because we have this idea that doesn't, you get to a certain level and that doesn't happen. It might morph and it might change, right? But they still exist in some shape.
And I think, it's funny. I turned 40 last year, and I got a happy birthday from some people, and I got like, schedule your mammogram, and then welcome to perimenopause, like all the things like. Yeah. And I don't think people talk enough about like the fun side of being in your 40s. So let me just pause there and talk about that. Like, I'm in the I don't know how to how to like correctly say this, but like the don't give a F era, in that, I spent so much of my 20s and my 30s, either on self-improvement or being extra critical, or, having this, being scared of asking for things. And I have, some of these Chingona moments, but I would say it wasn't like my everyday. And I'm not saying today is my everyday. I negotiate and I do stuff like that. But I think as you get older, you have less time for BS. You maybe have family and you have more responsibilities, and you don't have time for certain things. And you've gone through certain points in your life where like, I will be okay if this doesn't happen, or I've had this experience and I'm not willing to have this experience again. So I'm going to set these boundaries, or these are things that are non-negotiable. And so I think that also that piece ties into all of this, where you have some life experience as well as your education, where you're kind of like, I know what I'm worth, and I know what I can give, and I know what I can negotiate, and I know what I'm not willing to give. So I just did want to highlight that, because I think people go into their 40s like, all this stuff, health stuff. And then there is a beautiful part also about getting older and being more mature.
There's a confidence that comes with it, right? That's what I've learned. And I can remember, I had this conversation yesterday, I remember I must have been like 15 years old and Oprah turned 40. And and Oprah made this big whole, this is when she was still on TV. And Oprah had like this big episode dedicated to turning 40 and how she was like, this is the best decade of my life or whatever. And then she turned 50 and then she was like, no, this is the best decade.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just like, all right, the next like 20 or 30 years sound really great. I mean, yeah, you're going to deal with health stuff, but I mean, in terms of like the mental stuff,
Right.
and confidence and where you are in your career, it is 100% true because you're right. Like there's a lot of things that I would have, like the minutia of certain things that you tend to fixate or obsess about when you're in your early 20s and all the things that you care about that now, in your 40s, and I'm into my, 44 this year. And yeah, it's just like, I don't care. It's like, whatever. I don't have time. You know what I mean? Like,
You
I
have
don't
time.
have
You got to
time.
move on. You got to
Yeah.
move on. You got to focus on people that want to be around you. You want to focus on things that embrace your strengths, and so yeah, you have a different focus. And I think there's great parts about being in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, but I think it's just important to highlight also the beautiful parts of it, of getting
Yeah.
older.
No, absolutely. And what I try to do with these podcasts is I always think of myself in my 20s, and I always think, gosh, I wish I had known all of this, not like then, like everything that I know now, I wish I had known it, or I wish someone had told me. And I find myself saying this over and over again. So I like to have these conversations because I feel like, well, a lot of the listeners and a lot of the women that I speak with and that I work with are, early to mid-level career professionals that are, that are still learning and navigating their careers in their life. And so I really feel like all these nuggets that are shared in the episodes and the work that I do are really with them in mind, with young Alexis in mind, in terms of
Yeah.
how to navigate and make the best of your career while you can, right? Because obviously if you can get these things earlier on, just think how much, like again, think how prepared you would have been had you known this information in your 20s, 30s, and now going into your 40s, you'd be like Chingona times 10 to the 10th power, right?
Yeah, although, I think you have to go through that and you have to go through the
Yeah.
learnings. And because of that, you're able to do certain things differently, and so, what I would give some days to just go back one day in my 20s and do my runs without getting injured and go
Yeah.
party without having a hangover and let loose and travel without any responsibilities.
Sneeze
But
without pulling a muscle.
right, exactly. But at the same time, there was just a different era, and I think everything has a role and a purpose, and I'm grateful for those experiences too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So moving on. So I wanna kind of take a sharp right here and talk about, um, this a stage that of a woman's life that I have so many conversations about with women who are in the alternatives. And so one of the things that I learned about you when I was doing my diligence is that you raised capital for the fund while having a baby. While I don't know if you were pregnant or you had just you were pregnant. So I wanted to ask you, how did that season test you? What did you learn about your own limits or your lack thereof? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Fund One, I was raising, and it was taking a little bit longer than I anticipated, and I just ended up getting pregnant. Not wasn't planned, and I was getting bigger and bigger, and the fund wasn't closing. And I remember having to meet with my largest investor, and I was sitting across from him, and I was wearing this big blazer, trying to cover up my belly. And then I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to try to cover this up. I'm just going to let this. And I said, well, I'm pregnant and baby's due in October. If you want to rescind your commitment, okay. And then he's like, no, congratulations. Yeah, this is great. And then moved on. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I was like, well, first of all, the people you see who partners with you during all the times in your career. And I really valued his response for that. But then also, I went through it. I had my child, and I remember negotiating with a lawyer like the day after I gave birth. I think it's still probably on adrenaline, drugs, or I don't know what, but it was like I had such a great lawyer that kind of helped me navigate that. I was extremely exhausted. Um, and there's all the things that you go through with postpartum and learning to be a new mom and having to navigate all that. What really helped me was eventually finding a community of women doing this. I had a great group of investors that are also moms that help me navigate the night nurses. I have a great group of moms here that we all use the same night nurse. There's one woman that I called that's super chingona, and I was like having anxiety around coming back to work and dealing and how do I navigate everything. And she's like, honey, you got to spend money to make money. And basically, like, not that we were loading in money at the time, but if you have certain resources, can you outsource that? And so working with other working moms that said, okay, you can hire for this, you can outsource this, you don't have to do this. Going through the same kind of issues around body changes and baby changes and working, with your husband differently. So that was really good. And then also, I mean, I love working with moms because you are so much more efficient and productive. I used to have the weekends, I used to have nights, and I spent the early part of my career working nights and weekends. I don't remember one night and weekend that I didn't work. And now those are dedicated to my kids. And so, yes, well, I take a call after I put them to bed and fine, but I learned to just work in a certain time frame and set boundaries where, no, this is my kid time, and I won't do any night events that are not super important here. So if I get invited to a night event, I'm like, okay, I'm missing out on pickup, on dinner, and on nighttime routine. So it better be really good. It better be, getting some money in for the firm, getting a new deal in. And then you also kind of learn to bring your kids along. So I had mentioned this in another podcast before, but it was last year at an Easter egg hunt. One of my friends throws it every year, and she's another VC. And we went there, and I brought my kids. They were hunting for eggs, and we were talking through a deal, and we ended up doing a deal together. And last weekend, I was at a 7-year-old birthday party, and a company called me, and we were trying to win this deal. And we talked briefly on the deal, and I got the deal done. And so I'm not saying that I separate it completely, but I do set boundaries, and I am a lot more productive. And I know what I need to delegate and what I need to, do myself. And one last part of it is like, it's, I have an incredible, my parents are just incredible. They did so much for us growing up, and now they stay with me Monday through Friday. They take my son to school. My dad is texting me like groceries and like, make sure you eat, you never eat dinner. And so like, they're going to buy me a torta today because they know I like the tortas de milanesa, and like, just, and they take care of my daughter. They do laundry, all the things. And so I can't do this job without them. They've been incredible. I have a supportive husband that I travel a lot as well. And he does as well. So we manage the kids this way. But yeah, and I also had my second kid right before I raised my next fund. And it's funny because some of my investors were like, we didn't even notice, like you wouldn't even notice you were on leave. And I only took 4 weeks just kind of, obviously to recover, and every maternity leave is different. So I don't want to, some people say, oh my gosh, you only took 4 weeks. That's crazy. And they have a lot of thoughts around that, but I don't particularly love maternity leave. I like, having my foot in work and having my foot at home. I always say I'm a better mom when I work. And so it's not like I took 4 weeks completely off and then 4 weeks 100% on. I, did some board meetings while I was in my 4 weeks, and then I slowly came back to work. But I was able to take some meetings, not be able to work on recovery and PT and all the things that I need to do. So I think it's also being flexible and having your own firm. You're able to do that. We have a formal policy, but having gone through it, I think it's really important to be flexible so that we can be our best at work and our best at home. And so it's great that I can design that policy to be that way. And look, I still work nights and weekends, and I don't do a typical 9 to 5, but I'm able to structure it for me and my team so that we can do things like this at home and be the mom we want to be, and then also be a great investor. The last piece I will say about that I got great advice from is that, this having it all notion is not, I don't know who has it all, but that's not something I strive for, nor is it something that is really attainable. I got this advice from one of the partners at Goldman one time, and she said, sometimes I'm a great mom and I'm a terrible employee, and sometimes I'm a great employee and a terrible mom, and you just can't be perfect every day. And so some days, some weeks, I'm traveling every single day, and I'm out trying to find investors, new deals, and that's going really well. And I'm not at home, and I'm not able to see my kids. And some weeks I'm able to be at home and be able to go to my son's kindergarten graduation, but I miss out on an event or kind of maybe I lose out on a deal or something happens. And so knowing kind of when I'm at home, I want to be at home, I want to be focused. And when I'm at work, I want to be at work, I want to be focused. Um, and so having it all is not something that I strive for, but having a balanced life and setting boundaries. And I certainly am more productive now than I've ever been.
I really enjoy this response because I have this conversation a lot. I mean, I have all these conversations. I have a ton of conversations. I talk a lot. But what I like about this is that it's never a one size fits all kind of a thing, right? And like you said it, like for you to, the thought of having like a true 4 week or more than 4 week maternity leave is not for you. I agree with you. I had something very similar. Like as a business, I mean, it's the same thing as a business owner. You can never be completely 100% off. It's impossible. And I remember I was on the way, it was a Thursday, and I was on my way to my C-section, and a client called me, and I was it was like, okay, can you handle this or whatever they were asking me to do. And I was like, yeah, I'll get back to you on Monday. I got to do something right. I didn't want to say, like at the time, I didn't want to say that I was, I'm going to have a baby. They were actually a Swedish client, and, the Swedes really take their maternity. That time is very important to them. So I didn't want to say anything because I really wanted to work with this client. And I remember like had the baby on a Thursday, got out of the hospital on a Sunday. And by Monday, like there I am with the baby, like, and it was completely fine with, like, I was happy to do that because it was, for me, I'm at my best when I can do, when I can be a mom and I can run this business, because then I also think this is what my kids are seeing, like my kids are.
Totally. And so here, I'll tell you a little thing that my son said to me. He must have been 3 years old. He was really into bosses. 3.5 or 4 years. And he I don't know, he was wanted to be a boss. And he goes, or not boss, but he was really interested in it. And he goes, Mama, are you the boss of Chingona Adventures? He calls my fund Adventures. And I go, yes, I'm the boss of Chingona Adventures. He goes, can boys be bosses too? And I'm just like, whoa. He has no idea, and I just said, yes, of course, if you work really hard, boys can be bosses too. And it just, to your point, just struck me like, wow, he sees me doing this. And my daughter now sees me doing this and I absolutely love what I do. And then his father does the same thing, and we're both contributing to the home, and so, and it's never equal. It will never be equal, and there's phases that you go through. And so I just really appreciated that, because I was like, wow, he's seeing that, and he's seeing what different roles of women can be. And for us, it's, mama goes to work and she has her business, and one day he can do the same thing or do whatever makes him happy. So yeah, it's really important also to be explore your full self and find your purpose and enjoy what you do, and your kids and your family see it at home.
Yes. Yes, 100%. I love that. I love that. Oh, bless his heart. I love that. No, in my situation, like I'm the business owner. My husband we have the reverse, traditional roles, because he's the one that's really, managing like the household, the kids. We have 3. And so he's the one that really does I can't do all of it. And so he's really the one that's doing that. And I love that my kids see different roles and see that, because there's not that many fathers that have that role like him. And so for me, and then we talk about the investments. So my oldest kid is 12. and we talk about private equity backed company products that she uses, right? And so she's 12 and she already has that exposure and knows what the, to a certain degree, like what the investment space is. I don't know, she doesn't really know, right? But I've explained it to her. And so I feel like, okay, there's at least that little seed that has been planted. But anyways, I really just appreciated this response. And I think what's really important is that boundaries do not equate to weakness, right? Like, which is the perception. Boundaries really equate to leadership, right? And setting those boundaries and having a really clear idea, especially how you want to be perceived at home within your, within your nucleus, right? Like, I think that's extremely important. Are we good on time, Samara? Because I know that I have 2 more questions for you, but
that's fine. Yeah, we can do 2 more questions.
Okay. All right. So again, if we did a hard right, now we're going to do a hard left. So we're going to talk about next pattern recognition, because we know that the investment space has a love for pattern recognition, which is really just code for confirmation bias. So when you walk into the room and you're dealing with LPs, or you're in meetings, you're pitching, whatever it may be, how do you flip that power dynamic, or do you feel that power dynamic? I mean, that's, I guess, the first question.
Yeah, look, well, certainly, I mean, technically there is one with a founder and a VC, and a VC with an LP, just because it's like, who has the money? But we try not to feel that. But obviously, when you're asking for something, when you're asking for money, there tends to be that. However, if you find that power dynamic, it's probably not a right fit. And like, we're not in the position to, say, okay, turn down every investor or whatever else. But what I think is really important, because this is a long-term relationship, both us investing in founders and us partnering with LPs, the best situations and conversations are ones where you can have a discussion, where you can have a true kind of partnership, and because you're partnering with them for a long term, and they're going to be there through thick and thin, hopefully through the good times and not so good times. So from that perspective, from a power dynamic, if I walk into a room and I'm pitching someone, and then there's this power dynamic from the beginning, and it doesn't feel right, it's probably not a right fit for both parties. And I would say it's probably the same thing with a founder. I think the best founders, at least when they pitch us, are ones where we can have an active discussion, and it's not like this question answer. It's more of like, why you started the company, vision for the future, what do you want to change? Obviously you'll get into the revenue model and the market size and go to market strategy, all those things. And my team, we want to make sure we get those questions answered, and we have that. But when I go into these meetings, I really want to understand who you are as an individual, what motivates you, and ultimately that leads to who you're going to recruit, who's going to work with you, how are you going to work with your customers, how are you going to sell them, how are you going to fundraise. And so that does translate into some of the things we're looking for. But I really want to get to know the people, and this is a people business, as well as when I'm pitching somebody, I want to get them to get to know me. Some people want me to go straight to the deck and numbers and all the things, but I like to start with just who we are as individuals. I like to get to know people over time, so going to events and not necessarily pitching and going straight into it, but just getting to know you as a human being. You get to learn a lot about people's motivations, why they're talking to you, what they care about, what they're investing in. And those meetings have been the ones where I've gotten the best relationships, the best checks, because they understand me beyond just the numbers. They understand what we're ultimately building. And then also, I would say, this pattern recognition is why the industry looks the way it does. And it's, going to the same schools, same types of founders, same backgrounds. And there is a lot of that. And certainly many have been successful investing in that. But I think when you come in here, you look different anyway. You have a different network. You can source and find deals from different sources, different deals, different networks, different locations, different schools. And that, I believe, is what ultimately drives alpha, because this is a very competitive space. And if you're competing with everybody else, I can't compete with the big, Silicon Valley VC, but I can get in earlier. I can go in businesses that may not fit the traditional mold. And I'm not talking about founder, demographics. I'm talking about geography, experience, location, what companies are starting, the spaces that they're in. And it's very difficult to have differentiated deal flow. I would argue not many people do, if any, because that's changed over time, especially with technology. But really, being for us the first investment, that's what we target. We're high conviction, first check. We don't care who else is in. We like to meet founders before they start their businesses. We like to be the first call. And we've been able to win deals that were oversubscribed because of that. And I think, for them, I wouldn't say we're a founder like they are, but we are founding our VC firm. We're growing, and to be a tier one, top tier VC, and that takes time to prove it out. But being right in line with them and being the first call when they want to raise, being the first call when they get the first customer, being the first call when they have an issue, is for me really important. So this is a people business, and that's the beauty of it. But then there's also the challenges with that. And so making sure that we understand that we all have biases, and putting policies, procedures in place, being intentional about where you recruit, being intentional about where you source, being intentional about, maybe founders have an amazing product, amazing opportunity, amazing traction, but maybe they don't have the VC lingo, the swagger, all the resources. And looking beyond and seeing potential, I think for us is something that's really important.
Again, you're speaking my love language, Samara. Because this is what I have based my business on, is breaking the playbook mentality that firms have in order to broaden the pipeline. And when we broaden the pipeline, like you said, this is where you find differentiated deal flow. And this is what is, how I perceive it. And this is like a separate conversation that I guess now is a little bit on the touchy side, because everything that you've said to me is just, it's a competitive advantage, right? And so, like you said, you've been able to win deals that have been oversubscribed because of for a variety of different reasons, but who you are, how you come to the table, what you're looking, what are important criteria for you. Do you think that? And I was on a webinar earlier this week, and I asked one of the partners. It was a partner for a pretty large mid market PE firm, and the conversation was around this, about kind of sourcing outside, opening your kind of the parameters for search. Do you think that there is potential for firms to influence their peers when it comes to these things, or do you feel that it's just so deeply ingrained that it's very unlikely that they'll change?
I think change comes gradually. There's some changes that happen really rapidly, and I don't think they're sustainable. But when there are specific moments of either rapid change or a specific event, that does change the industry a little bit. Just like when there's, an earthquake or something big that changes the foundation slightly, but over time it can move mountains. And for us, that's how we think about it. It's hard to say, like, we're going to change the industry. That is a tough undertaking for anybody, certainly, for us or for any one individual. But there have been strides to make change. And I do ultimately think that once the numbers don't lie, and those take time to prove out. So the way I think about it is making changes there's big changes, and there's market changes, and then there's individual changes that you can make. And for us, how we think about that is who we invest in, what their numbers, revenue, traction, future fundraises, multiple uninvested capital, all the things, to all those data points I see as, okay, this is something that's working. This is something that is changing. This is something that, wow, we were one of the first in, and now they're getting a lot more people excited about them. And this is a founder that would have never gotten noticed, and not traditional from a background, like geography, even industry. And now people are starting to take notice. So for me, I mean, my vision would be to change the way venture capital is done. Who gets funded, who makes money, who makes the decisions, and that takes time. But I do see, I've been in venture now for 10 years. I think this week or next week is my 10-year anniversary. And I have seen a change from when I came in, very few women, and now more women have started to become investors, have started to get promoted to partners, have started to launch their own firms. And so I am seeing some of that change, but it does take time. And I think ultimately it's when we start seeing some of these successes come through and get noticed is when we're going to drive a lot more of that change. And, that's also dependent on the decision makers. So that's the limited partners, investors that are investing in these funds in our world. And then who those investors that they're investing with are investing in. But for me, also, why I love this space is that we're investing in companies that are solving these incredible problems, and some of them are, yes, getting an Uber, and some of them are getting your takeout faster, but some of them are figuring out how to help women's health and own their own data, and helping to change the way we learn and upskill, and helping people that have non-traditional education degrees and backgrounds get higher paying jobs. ChatGPT has changed everything in terms of how we work, how we learn. And so this is one of the beautiful things I love about this space, is that you get to be an early investor in some of these changes that are going to fundamentally change history and change the way things are done in our world. And that's what's the most exciting part for me. So if we can make some change, even a little bit, and make a small dent somewhere, then we've done our job.
Mm-hmm. I like that. That's essentially how, people always ask me how I got into this space, and it's very much so, well, I fell into it, right? Because you don't wake up as a little girl and like, well, one day I want to be a business owner that works in the lower middle market, right? Like you don't say those things, right? And so I fell into this, and it's always very inspiring, just hearing the impact, whether it's VC, whether it's, private equity, just the impact to the local community. And I particularly love lower middle market, because I think that's where the magic is, and early stage, because that's really, that's really where you can see, I think, the most amount of impact and the most amount of ripple effect at those stages. So to wrap up, Samara, what is one piece of advice that you would give to the next generation of investors? What's one thing that you want to share with us?
So the piece of advice I would share is it's very simple. Just do it. I'm taking the line from Nike, but I think so many times in my life where I've paused and I said, am I too scared to do this? Should I do this? And if you believe in yourself and you follow your passion and your dream, taking a step forward to just try it, just do it, just take the first baby step to reaching out to someone, to developing a minimum viable product for whatever you're developing, to create a website with your company. A lot of things seem more daunting than they really are. A lot of things seem more risky than they really are. And the best innovations, the best leaders have all done something new, done something contradictory, have made a name for themselves, have made history. But it's not like you have to make history or you have to do these grand things, but just starting off with baby steps. And especially for women learning to celebrate your failures. I have to tell myself every single day. I look at my daughter who was learning how to walk recently, and she was kind of scared and wobbling. And then when she would fall, she would start crying. And when we started doing it, was if she would fall, we would be like, yay, we would celebrate it. And we got really excited when she would start clapping, right? And they got her motivation to do it again. And I just thought, wow, what if we did that as adults, right? Every time somebody told us no, every time we started something and didn't get to it, or it didn't work out, we celebrated it. And so celebrating your failures, embracing them, because when you do that, you're able to then take the first step and try new things and understand that if it doesn't work out, what's the worst that can happen, and having these calculated risks that we talked about earlier. And the best thing is having, supportive network around you that can help you and celebrate you in that journey. I think is really important. So if you've been thinking about trying something, or you've been, holding off on starting a company or trying a new role or trying a new hobby, just do it.
That is sage advice. I would probably add JFDI. So just do it. That awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Samara, this is, I after, the 40 minutes or so that we've been talking, I totally get this. There's a lot of Chingona energy that has just came through the screen. And I think you've given a lot of listeners, in many ways, like a blueprint and a spark. And again, a lot of this Chingona energy, that even, you don't even have to know exactly or quite understand what the word Chingona means or Chingon means, right? But I think it's transmitted, like the feeling through this conversation. So thank you very much for being a guest on Take the Stage. You are definitely, aside from being a Chingona, you are definitely a lady who rocks. And so I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to Take the Stage. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To hear past shows, please go to our website, career-rockstars.com. If you are a company or candidate who would like to work with Career Rockstars, reach out on LinkedIn or send an email to Alexis at career-rockstars.com. Thanks again, and until next time.